Hello, listeners, and welcome to the Sailing and Cruising the East Coast of the United States podcast. I'm Bela Musitz.
And I'm Mike Wasserman.
Hey, Mike, today we have a great guest on the show, Heath Moldveen. Heath is in technical sales for Seahawk Premium Yacht Finishes. And I've known Heath for a bunch of years. I actually met him about 20 years ago because he and I are both on the ski patrol at Gore Mountain. And he has worked in this industry for 20 years, and he helped me with the bottom paint on my boat. And I thought to myself, you know what? He might be a great guest on the show.
Okay, Bela, I don't know a lot about this whole operation here, but we're going to spend 30 minutes talking about paint?
Yeah, and we're going to watch it dry, too.
Outstanding.
We're going to talk specifically about bottom paint. So one of the things about salt water in particular is that stuff likes to grow in it. Salt water is very nutrient rich. So I've had boats in freshwater for many years, and, maybe once a year I'd scrub the boat, or when I take it out of the water, I'd scrub the bottom with a hose and a little soft Brillo pad, and it's fine. But in salt water, it's amazing the stuff that'll grow. And you say on fiberglass, how does stuff even attach itself to fiberglass? It's not organic, right? How does that work?
Right.
But it's magic to me. Somehow it grows. So when you have a boat in salt water, you put all sorts of concoctions on the bottom of it, the part that's in the water, to keep and prevent this stuff from growing. Because when the stuff grows on it, number one, it does sort of eat into the fiberglass. And number two, it really slows you down. And on a sailboat, when you're only going 5 or 6 miles an hour anyway, if you lose a half a mile an hour, that's a big deal. So we have this broken into 2 episodes because it was a little bit long. And what we're going to do is in the first episode, we're going to talk about various different types of paint, how to pick a yard to paint your boat, and the types of things to look for. And so why don't we just jump right into the interview, Mike?
Sounds great, Bela. I'm looking forward to it.
Hi, folks. Today on the podcast, we have a very special guest, and that person is Heath Moldveen. Heath is the technical salesperson with Seahawk Premium Yacht Finishes. And what Seahawk does is they make bottom paint for the marine industry. And Heath is an expert in that area, having worked in that business or sector for a large number of years. And I thought, who not better to have on the show to talk about bottom paint? Because all of the listeners of this podcast, I know, are interested in bottom paint. So I invited Heath to be on the show, and he graciously accepted. So welcome to the show, Heath.
Hey, Bela. Thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you about it.
Yeah, that's great. So just give us a quick little background on sort of how you got into, the marine finishes business and industry.
Right. So much to my parents' chagrin, after paying for a lot of college, I decided I was going to go sailing. And I got a job coaching sailing at SUNY Maritime in the Bronx, and lived under the Throgs Neck Bridge like a troll for a number of years, coaching sailing and traveling around the country with the team. And during that time, part of my job was taking care of all the facility and the boats and everything involved with that. Obviously, lots of bottom paint got applied. We had like 60 boats to take care of. I became very good friends with the Interlux rep at the time, because I started my career out with Interlux, part of Axon Nobel. And that rep kind of brought me in and said, hey, you'd be great for this job. You should apply. And there happened to be somebody retiring, which this is a job where it's kind of one of those, you wait your turn. And when somebody retires, you might get a job. Or if somebody, unfortunately leaves, then there's job openings. But for the most part, these jobs are pretty coveted and tough to come by. But I got very fortunate. My buddy brought me in, and to this day we still work together, which is pretty cool. Almost 15 years later. I've since left Interlux to go work for Seahawk Premium Yacht Finishes. I was working for Interlux and All Grip for a period of time, owned by Axon Nobel. And this past December, I got a phone call learning that Axon Nobel had once again purchased a company, Seahawk Premium Yacht Finishes, and now I'm back with my old brethren at Seahawk, at Axon Nobel.
Wow, so you've kind of come full circle in the industry from that perspective, right?
Yeah, I joke about it. I kind of had like a 1.5 year work release program, and now I'm back with the old team, and it's pretty cool. We're still running as two parallel businesses, and I get to still focus on anti-fouling paint, which is cool. I don't get mixed in with the topside paint as much.
Okay. Can you just give us a kind of a brief overview of Seahawk and sort of the various different lines they have, like starting from, the deck paint to hulls
Sure.
to the bottoms, and then we'll focus
Sure.
in on the
So,
bottoms.
absolutely. So full disclosure, we really only do bottom paint. That's been our focus. This company was founded, I think in '78. I think we're 40-something years old, and it was founded by two brothers, the Nori brothers, Eric and David, and they ran the company up until December of last year, and basically they've done a great job building the brand. I watched them go from stopping into my yards to, oh my God, there's 150 gallons here, to, wow, I really need to work and focus on not losing business to them. Of course, when I was working with Interlux, and they make some phenomenal products, and they've got a really great chemist, and we're really, I would say we're leading the way in many different facets of the paint anti-fouling industry, even though we were the smallest family-owned company up until last year.
Yeah.
So other products, right? So we make anti-fouling paints, and then we make primers for those anti-fouling paints. We do some solvents, and then we have a whole line of epoxies called Hawk Epoxy. So we make a 100% solids epoxy that you can use for laminating and fillets and bonding, etc.
Got it. So I stand corrected. You guys don't do deck paint. So it's bottom paint and epoxies. Yeah. Very good.
Correct. So I work for Seahawk. We also have the parent company of Seahawk is New Nautical Coatings. New Nautical does have other brands within it that do make some deck paints, single part deck paints that are out there.
Yeah.
But Seahawk is the premium brand of those three.
So is your business mostly commercial or recreational?
Interesting. I can go from calling on a yard that has 20-foot runabouts all the way up to super yachts. And yesterday I was standing in like you said, a commercial shipyard with a 900-ton travel lift and tugboats. And we were looking at ferries and tugboats that day. So the diversity of who we sell to is only limited by really the purses of the people wanting to pay. Commercial products traditionally are a little less quality controlled. Colors may vary because you're painting 3,000 feet of ship versus 20 feet of boat, where the colors need to be appropriate. And as you can imagine, in the super yacht industry, those colors need to be consistent, spot on, and exactly as they expect.
Yes.
So that's what we've done. So it's very varied is the answer, but primarily the focus is recreational.
Got it. So if I asked someone who let's say worked in a yard and, had been a long time yard manager, and I asked him, so, what stands out about Seahawk? What would they say?
So I think it would be service and performance, and really service being, we've got a team of sales reps that's out on the road hustling every day. We're calling on all these yards. We're providing services to end users like yourself on Paradox, as I've done, looking at the bottom of your boat. So we do everything from trainings in the yard to make sure the applicators know their stuff, down to problem solving and claim mitigation, if you would, depending on what we see. The one thing that I'll tell you is Seahawk it's performance, service, and consistency.
Got it.
We don't change our line very much. When we add products that work.
Yeah. So let's take a deep dive in on some of the various different types of bottom paint. So what are sort of the different categories of bottom paint that I could put on a boat like my boat, Paradox, a 45-foot sailboat?
Excellent. So that's a great question. So bottom paints, traditionally you had what people would call hard and soft paints. Soft paints being ablative. What does ablative mean? A lot of people say ablative. It's ablative. what does to a blade mean? It means to wear away, right? So we make paints that are hard, modified epoxies, and they basically release protection or biocides through leaching. And it's a little less controlled, and they work really, really well at first, and then you kind of have to scrub them to reactivate the surface because you have what's called the leach layer. It's that outer layer of anti-fouling film, which basically doesn't contain any biocide, but it has resin and pigment in it. So that's hard paints. And then you have this category of anti-fouling paints, ablative anti-fouling paints. Ablative paints wear away over time. Think of them like a bar of soap, right? You put that bar of soap in water, and water runs over it, and you get a little bit of polishing. Now, you put that bar of soap, and the water's running over it faster, you get a little more polishing. And the idea is basically that you encapsulate the biocide with the resin. And by doing so, you're getting new performance, new protection coming out of the coating stack all the way through the life of the paint. So as long as there's paint on your boat, you tend to have really good performance. You don't have to do that diving and scrubbing that's required with those harder, traditional modified epoxy paints. There is, however, one more category that's kind of new in the last 10 years, and that's this hybrid technology or thin film technology. And when we talk about that, we're really talking about paints that go on a little bit thinner. Maybe you get 25% further out of a gallon of paint. But it doesn't necessarily rely on that polishing. It's much harder, a little more durable. And typically these products kind of fall into that middle price point category, low to middle end of the price range. Different resin technologies. And resins are really the key. It's not necessarily how much copper you have, which traditionally that's what people would look at. And in a hard modified epoxy, that is key because it's not controlled. So the cool part about ablatives and these resin hybrid technologies is that it's a bit more of a controlled release, which gives you consistent performance across the lifespan of the paint. Think of it more of a plateauing curve versus a downward curve.
Yeah. So is there a particular type of paint that if I'm a racer, I would want to use versus if I'm a cruiser?
Sure. So within Seahawk, our paints can all, for the most part, be burnished. Burnishing being, either, sanding with like 300 to 400, working your way up to, some people go as high as 1200 on the bottom of their boat, rubbing it with a diaper, you'd think, because they think they're going to go much faster. And you know what? In a one design fleet, that's vitally important. We can do that with our premium products like BioCop TF or Color Coat. We're able to do that with those products very, very well. However, there are some specialty paints out there from other companies like Interlux, and they make a traditional racing finish, either Balta-Plate or VC Offshore. And those are a vinyl type product, very, very thin film, incredibly, incredibly hard. The trade-off with that is that the performance may not be as good.
And when you say performance, you mean protection against growth.
Exactly, Bella. Yeah. So it's you may get a little more slime on the surface sooner, but those boats that are racing professionally or very competitively, at least beer can racing, but really they want to win. They will clean their boats before they race every week. So you want that nice, hard, durable finish that's very, very smooth. Now, there's a middle of the road there by going to a high-performance ablative product like BioCop, for example, where you've done the wet sanding process, but you are using more of a self-polishing paint. Why? Now maybe you don't have to polish, you don't have to clean your bottom every time you race. It may not have any slime on it, so you go racing. And in most cases, you won't have any of that going on. The product works really, really well. But again, racing paints are kind of not new, but another echelon of product to talk about.
Yeah, yeah. But your typical cruiser, weekend sailor, even live aboard maybe, they're going to go with your more, what paints would they typically go and use?
Right. So we make paints that basically go from and price obviously comes into the choice selection, and we could probably use Paradox as a really good example. But we make paints that start at like $75-$80 a gallon and run the gamut all the way up to almost 300 and change a gallon, depending on how you buy it. Right. And that there's a lot of things that go into that decision-making process, as you learned when we talked about your boat. So we have a bottom that's in good shape seemingly, and then you start to sand it and you realize that, well, maybe it's not in as good a shape as it needs to be, and maybe it's starting to flake. So you may not want to invest that money knowing that your plan down the road may be to start over and blast the bottom. And you do that through a media blast process where you're going to go back down to the substrate, the gel coat or the aluminum, and build up with primers, 2-part epoxy primers to protect that bottom further. And then at that point, you may want to invest in that very, very high-end product. But there's also areas where you just don't need to spend $250 on a gallon of paint. In the Northeast, I live in Rhode Island, and you boat on Narragansett Bay, and we've got a short season, unfortunately. As sad as that is to say, it is a short season, and our water is pretty cold in the beginning of the season, and it warms up. It was in the 80s this year, but it quickly drops back off right around now. I think it's down in 68 degrees, some 70 maybe even still. In those colder water temperatures, you don't need to go to the upper echelon. You also may say, you know what, I don't mind a little bit of slime on the bottom of my boat. Not the biggest deal. So you don't buy the boosted product. You buy one of the middle-of-the-road products. In our product range, we make a product called Q-Coat. Q-Coat's a multi-season, ablative, self-polishing product, but it only uses one biocide, which is cuprous oxide, which is the most common biocide used in anti-fouling paints now. Whereas BioCop uses cuprous oxide plus a technology to fight slime.
Got it.
And that's kind of where your price range changes a little bit, right? Also, one of the most expensive parts of the paint is the resin. Resin's expensive, and resin denotes how that product wears, how it polishes, thereby also adjusting how the product releases protection or cuprous oxide. And so there's a lot of choices that go into it, Bella. It's not a cut and dry thing as we've discussed. It's pretty, you got to really have a plan and know where you're going. Or just be okay with maybe spending a little more money than you want to spend, or maybe a little bit more money to have that top tier performing product.
Right.
So again, that financial thing kind of happens there with everything, right?
Yeah. And the example you gave was, we can talk about my boat, Paradox. So a year ago, or in the spring, this past spring, I should say, we looked at her and we knew she needed some bottom paint. And we also looked at it and said, we've got enough layers of paint on here that at some point in the very near future, you're going to want to media blast this down back to the gel coat, like you said, and then start all over again. It's like stripping paint off of old furniture. At some point
100%.
in time, you got to go back to the natural wood and build up from there. So we decided to put a lower cost paint on it to get one season out of it. And hopefully the boat got hauled today, as a matter of fact. And
congrats.
Yeah.
It's sad day too.
Yeah, it's a sad day. And hopefully it's going to get media blasted here this fall. And then we're going to, paint it in the spring. So it's a really important point you're making here, is that you got to take the whole picture into account, right? So it's how you're going to use your boat, sort of what the intended use is, and also where you're using it, right? So if I'm in, like you said, I'm in the Northeast or in Maine, the water temperatures are very different and the nutrients are different than I'm from the Chesapeake Bay, or if I'm down in Florida.
100% accurate. Yep, that's exactly correct. I mean, it's funny, like my family has a boat on Lake George. I have a boat in Narragansett Bay. My boat gets painted every year. My dad's boat, while he uses a premium product, he paints it once every 5 years, or whenever he can call me and say, hey, can you come up and paint this thing?
Yeah.
Again, it's just so different depending on where you do your boating, much like you said.
Yeah. So let me ask you this question. So if I'm, if I buy a boat, like I bought one, and I know very little about bottom paint, and I've known you for 20 years now through the ski patrol.
Been a while, huh?
Yeah, through the ski patrol at Gore. So I had someone I could go to and someone who could give me advice, right? Sort of really good, solid advice, and someone I trusted.
Yeah.
But if I don't have that connection, how do I figure out what type of paint I should get, et cetera? Where do I go for that information?
So that's a great point. We all have websites, right? So our website would be, seahawkpaints.com. So you can go to the website and read, but even reading, you may get confused. And I know you, Bella, you like to do your research. And I know you did some reading and you still had questions, right? So where do you go then? All of our companies, whether it's Pettit, Interlux, or Seahawk, we all have 800 numbers that go to a tech line. That tech line may be answered by a person in the office who's an expert on the subject. Or, like ours is, those calls get forwarded to our phones regionally based on the zip code or the area code calling in. The nice part about that is somebody could say to me, hey, I'm, Bella Musitz, and I've got a boat over at Brewer Cove Haven, or Safe Harbor Cove Haven, I guess now. And can you fill me in? What do you know about the area? What do you need? Well, where your boat is actually a pretty heavy fouling area. It's a tough area. And you really need to have some of those more tenacious anti-fouling paints. Again, depending on your scenario throughout the season, much like you have a plan that you're going to blast yours, but you'd want to use that premium Biocop product or a Color Code or Q-Coat product. So you can certainly reach out directly to the manufacturers. The other good place for advice is just right in your boatyard. Most boatyards are very knowledgeable. The Safe Harbor yards are phenomenal. They're very, very prominent in Rhode Island and New York, and popping up more and more every day. But even those mom and pop yards, they've been at it forever. And their knowledge of the water, their knowledge of what's worked, they know it. They know what's on the bottoms of those boats in many ways, and they see them. They haul each and every one this time of year.
Yeah.
So you get to see the performance, and they know what to recommend.
And that recommendation, like you said, is very much based, or can be based very much on their specific location. Because
100%.
Yeah, Narragansett Bay is a very nutrient-rich bay, right? There's a lot of growth in Narragansett Bay, and you can be 100 miles this direction or that direction. It could be very different. Yeah,
it's definitely, geographically. The recommendation comes down to really where are you? What are you going to do with your boat? And then what's the goal in the end? There's always that long-term goal, but the short-term goal is I don't want any growth on my boat, right? In the end, that's the simple answer.
Right.
But most of the yards are pretty open to offering some stuff. Many yards will choose one brand, and that's what they use in that boat yard. Other yards will allow the owner to choose what they want. And most are somewhere in the middle. But it's, so I go around and talk to all these guys and educate them and train. But in many cases, the owner calls us and says, hey, I'm not really sure what's on my boat. Can you come look at it? And it may take a week or two, depending on our schedules. It may be the same day if we happen to be in the yard. But we're more than happy to come out, take a look, and really work with the customer to recommend the right product. The other place to start asking questions is boat shows. Get out there and go to the boat shows. I know we didn't have many last year because of the whole COVID thing, but boat shows are back, and they're a fun time. And there's tons to learn. There's tons of products to see and put your hands on. So getting out and going to boat shows is a great way to learn about the industry, the products, and in most cases, you have all the experts in one place that you'd ever need.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about boat yards and them being a source of information and knowledge. And if I'm thinking of getting my hull paint or my bottom painted, and I'm not going to do it myself, I want to have a yard do it. And let's say I don't have a yard that I use on a daily basis, right? So I'm a transient, let's say, right?
Sure.
What do I look for in a yard? How do I pick out a yard and say, okay, these are the guys who I'm going to, pay whatever it is, thousands of dollars to paint and prep my bottom?
Right. So first thing, they need to call you back when you call them. That's the number one thing I'll tell you. The next thing, in my opinion, is,
before you go on, that's a really good point, because that really speaks to their level of customer service, right? If they don't call you back, right now, right, when you're trying to give them business, are they going to call you back after? Right?
And that's the concern. I mean, listen, most yards, I'm going to be honest, my customers, I'm very fortunate. I have very, very good boat yards. I cover a territory from, the New York border in Connecticut, all of Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts. And that doesn't really happen in my area. Oftentimes, though, sometimes you call a yard and they're just too busy to take the work, and they don't call you back, or they wait a week to call you back because there's no way. So, you want a yard with staff, but you want a yard that has staff that's not so big that they can't be watched and made sure that they're doing the job right. I personally am a big fan of cleanliness, right? If you walk in a boatyard and there's stuff everywhere, for me, that doesn't work. I need organization, and usually when you see how they put their their foot forward, right? What's their front facing, their customer focus is it organization? Is it service? Is it, and each yard's a little bit different. Most boat yards, I would recommend and say, hey, they can apply it. Now, with Seahawk paints, we are a little bit unique in that we offer a certification process for our applicators. So somebody like myself, one of the reps, would come in, work with the applicators, maybe the yard owner would be involved, and we'll get under a boat and paint that boat with the customer. And we do the work with them, and we use that as a training to make sure that they know how to apply the paint and that they're applying it to the standards that we recommend. For example, with ablative paints, if you think about it, they wear away. If you put that ablative paint on too thin, you're not going to get the performance that you want to get for the whole season or 2 seasons. So it's imperative to make sure, A, we're using the right tools, we're prepping right? Prep is huge. That's your foundation. And so you go through all those steps to make sure that the yard's doing it as we would recommend them to do it.
Yeah.
Now, we're not drill sergeants, but we're there to help them and work them through it.
Yeah. So are there specific questions I can ask a yard besides, are you Seahawk certified, applicator?
Yeah, sure. That's obviously the simple answer. Everybody should use Seahawk, in my opinion. No, listen, I think it's, hey, can I see a job that you've done previously? Do you have anybody that you just painted for? Can I give them a call? Is that all right? Walk the dock. If there's if there's bad to be heard, yeah, it will be said on the dock. But in reality, ask for recommendations. Ask them to see a job. Walk the yard with the yard manager or the service manager that you're working with, and have that conversation. Let them point out jobs that they've done and show success. And does that meet your need, right? Yeah. Does that meet what you want? Some yards take it so far, they make it so perfect, but that comes at a cost. Maybe that's not what you need for your boat, but it works for the guy that has a professional crew. So it's a different. You really got to find that niche that works for you and what your desires are within really what your goals are.
Yeah. That's great advice, Heath. That's great advice.
Okay, Bela, I was a little skeptical at first, 30 minutes on paint, okay, but that was great. I really got to thinking a lot more about just painting a boat in general and the types of paint and the relationship between the price point and the features of the paint that you choose, how you're using your boat and your location. That was all fascinating to me, and it makes total sense, but I'd never really thought that deeply about it. So, that I thought that was really useful. But I'm also kind of interested, like, I think for smaller boats, don't a lot of people want to paint their own boat?
Yes, they do. A lot of people in the yard do that. And that's why we've broken this into 2 episodes, because the first episode is sort of the one you just listened to, sort of focuses on, picking out the type of paint and the yard and picking out the yard. And the next episode is going to be all about how to do it yourself and different good facts and tips. And, both of these episodes are really full of a lot of good facts and tips that Heath shared with us. So I think the next one will be great as well. So, hey, listeners, thanks for joining us for another episode. We hope you found that our conversation interesting and thought-provoking. And if you have any questions about what we discussed, hey, please get in touch with us. Our email is sailingtheeast@gmail.com.
If you enjoy the podcast, don't forget to hit that follow button on your podcasting app. And of course, if you know of somebody that would make a good guest on the show, like Heath was, let us know. So until next time, signing off from over here in Münster, Germany. See you soon, Bela.
All right, Mike, and signing off here from chilly upstate New York. See you soon.